Labor will support this bill through all stages, and we've also today supported the urgency for the passage of this bill. You can't say that you want action in a hurry and then not support urgency for this bill. But I think there needs to be a little bit of background about this bill before we get into the details of it. Last month, a number of us, in fact I believe probably all the colleagues in the House, received a letter from the Honourable Peter Dunn. Starts off, "Dear colleague." The date of the letter was the 15th of April last month. He said he wanted to update us on the progress and achievements of the Psychoactive Substances Act 2013. He went on to say that a blanket ban on yet to be developed psychoactive substances would be very difficult to implement and to enforce, particularly as it will relate to products or some substances that have not yet existed, or etc., etc. He then went on to blame local government because the implementation had not occurred as fast as he would like. And he went on to say he knows there are pockets of frustration, but remember the Act is only 9 months old. That was on the 15th of April. There was no intention by the Minister in charge of this legislation, who put the legislation through the House, to make any changes based on information, and I have to say a very detailed fact sheet, Mr Speaker, a fact sheet that tells us what has happened since the bill came into effect on the 18th of July, what the authority is doing, the transitions to regulations. In fact, under this part, it says the authority is operating a temporary system of controls called the interim regime, etc., etc. Now, what has happened here is that the government, through members of the backbench, putting pressure on the Cabinet to make some changes, because maybe the backbenchers were listening to their constituents, something that was happening right across this Parliament. We were being told that we had got it wrong, that we needed to make changes. That went on for months and months. The pressure built. The pressure on the backbenchers built. Their constituents were telling them what the problems were, and the reports were coming out in the media on a daily basis. So from the 15th of April, and Todd McClay, Todd McClay, a minister, was probably one of the ministers who did know what was happening. But the pressure was going on in a very, very strong way onto the backbenchers. So then there needed to be an action, and this is where I find it rather difficult, because when you read the letter, there is nothing about getting this changed at all. And then you hear from the Minister that we have been discussing this issue last month, and we did it more than once, we did it several times. Minister, was it after the 15th of April when we received the letter? And the question in committee we can ask, was Peter Dunn in the loop? Because why was he telling us, no need for change, everything's going well, we're pretty pleased with what is happening? And then I read the regulatory impact statement that the Ministry has put out, and it's dated, I think, the 4th of May 2014. So they wrote that after the Cabinet was looking at this issue. So they didn't actually give this advice to the Cabinet before they made the decision. And the regulatory impact statement is very interesting. It says we don't have all the information we need to fully assess the impact of this proposal. There are a number, we don't know the number or the proportion of people. We don't know the exact date the regulations will be made. We don't know the impact on other regulatory actions. We can't say how much enforcement work is needed by the police. And finally, we don't know what proportion of people use these products and what the effect will be. And there's been no formal review of this proposal planned. So in the committee stages, Minister, I would like you to answer all those questions, because you've been working on it for a long time before you have brought this bill to the House, and we're going to have to trust your word on this, because it was very clear when the original bill was brought into this House that my colleague Ian Lees-Galloway warned that if we didn't take time and care over this bill, we would get it wrong. He made that a very strong warning in all the speeches that he made. He also said we had the opportunity at the Select Committee to get it right and not to rush it. He asked for it not to be rushed. And there was no need to rush it, Minister, because it was back in October 2012 that you got the first regulatory impact statement from the Ministry of Health. It took till April the next year before the bill to be introduced, 6 months later. And that original regulatory impact statement said this: the current legislation has proved ineffective in dealing with the rapid growth of new psychoactive substances such as party pills and other legal highs, which can be synthesised to be one step ahead of controls. Cabinet has agreed to new legislation to address this by prohibiting the sale of all psychoactive substances unless approved by the regulator. So back in October 2012, this is what it said the Cabinet had agreed, that they would have new legislation prohibiting the sale of all psychoactive substances unless approved by a regulator. The new legislation, it goes on to say, will reduce risks to the public by removing untested and potentially harmful products being sold, etc. That is dated October 2012. 6 months later, we got the bill, and it was rushed through in about 2 months, I believe, through the Select Committee. And so what we're seeing here is when the chooks do come home to roost. And sometimes, even if it is said by the opposition and the government doesn't wish to take much notice of them, sometimes maybe they ought to be listened to, because we are back here trying to fix something that maybe we could have got right in the original bill. Was then an interjection, I believe, by one of the backbenchers over there, well, what did Labor do about it? Labor did nothing about it. Well, I can tell you that Labor did do something about psychoactive substances. They've been around for about 15 years, and they were legal. They were, Mr. Speaker. I thought you were telling me my time was up,
no,
but I've got
2 more minutes.
2 minutes. They were legal highs because the Misuse of Drug Act only bans substances that are specifically listed in the legislation. And attempts were made under a Labor government to ban using the Misuse of Drugs Act, such things as BZP, and they were replaced very quickly by a new product. So we did ask the Law Commission to undertake a comprehensive review of the Misuse of Drugs Act. It was completed and given to this government in 2011, I believe, and then it took to 2013 to do something about it. It recommended that we did make changes to the Misuse of Drugs Act. The government have chosen not to do that, put in place a very narrow bill which is now needed to be changed. I am pleased that is being changed. I'm particularly pleased for Trevor Mallard, who went out to bat strongly against animal testing with Mojo Major, and I have to give some credit to John Banks. I don't always agree with the language that he uses, but there is no doubt that he does have passion for animals, as does my colleague Trevor Mallard and Mojo Major, who also raised this, Mojo Mathers, who raised this issue on a number of occasions. And so we are back here now to fix this problem. I would like to see it fixed as fast as possible, but there are some questions that need to be answered by the government around the delay and around answers to the questions that have been posed in the regulatory impact statement of May, just a few days ago, put out by the Ministry of Health.
I call Mojo Mathis.
I will be upfront.